My beloved child. Stop scrolling. Do not let this moment pass as if it were ordinary, because what you are about to hear was meant to find you at exactly this time. There are moments when heaven remains silent, and there are moments when even the quiet places of eternity begin to whisper. This is one of those moments. You did not arrive here by accident. You were led here by a path you could not see, a path that was prepared long before your heart ever learned the language of waiting. I have watched every tear that never reached another person's eyes. I have heard every prayer you spoke only within your thoughts because you believed no one else could understand them. Even when your voice was silent, I understood every word. Even when you convinced yourself that your story had been forgotten, I never looked away from your life. Something has been unfolding behind the scenes. Something your natural eyes could not recognize. While you believed nothing was changing, countless small moments were moving into place like stars aligning before the sunrise. You questioned why certain doors remained closed. You wondered why conversations ended too quickly, why certain people disappeared without explanation, why your heart refused to stop remembering someone you tried so hard to release. You called it confusion. Others called it coincidence. But heaven has been watching a story that neither you nor anyone around you could fully understand. Listen carefully now, because the truth hidden beneath the surface is deeper than you imagined. The person you call your soulmate has carried feelings they have struggled to speak aloud. Those emotions have not always appeared in their actions. Fear often disguises love. Pride often hides vulnerability. Silence often protects a heart that believes it may not survive another disappointment. You have mistaken silence for absence. Yet silence has never always meant the heart was empty. There were nights when they remembered your smile without anyone knowing. There were ordinary afternoons when your name crossed their thoughts unexpectedly. They tried to distract themselves with work, with responsibilities, with conversations, with new routines, believing time would erase what remained inside them. Instead, every attempt to forget became another reminder. Every step away somehow led back toward the memory of you. Do not misunderstand these words. This is not because destiny removes human choice. Every soul still makes decisions. Every heart still chooses courage or fear. Yet some connections leave marks so deep that even distance cannot erase them completely. You wondered whether you had imagined everything. You wondered whether your kindness had been ignored. You wondered whether your love had simply been too much. No, my child. Love given sincerely is never wasted. Even when it appears unnoticed, it leaves fingerprints upon another heart. Recently, hidden from many eyes, your soulmate spoke honestly in a place where they believed no one important would hear. It was not spoken before a crowd. It was not announced with confidence. It was shared quietly, almost as though they feared hearing the truth themselves. They admitted that your presence changed them. They admitted they still wondered how your life was unfolding. They admitted that certain memories refused to disappear no matter how determined they became. Those words carried more weight than they realized. Not because heaven requires perfect speeches, but because honesty opens doors that pretending never can. Still, do not rush ahead of my timing. The story has not reached its final chapter. You have prayed for immediate answers while I have been preparing lasting transformation. If I had given you everything the moment you desired it, many hidden wounds would have remained untouched. Sometimes I protect blessings until hearts become strong enough to carry them. You have mistaken waiting for rejection. You have mistaken delay for abandonment. Yet neither has been true. Every season has quietly been shaping both of you in different ways. While you learned endurance, another heart learned humility. While you learned surrender, another heart slowly confronted regret. While you searched for peace, another soul discovered that running from genuine feelings only creates greater emptiness. These lessons cannot be forced. They must be lived. There is something else I want you to understand. Do not allow bitterness to become your companion. Bitterness speaks loudly but heals nothing. Forgiveness often begins long before reconciliation is possible. Peace often arrives before circumstances change. If you guard your heart with resentment, you will struggle to recognize the blessing when it finally appears before you. Continue becoming the person I created you to be. Do not measure your value by another person's uncertainty. Do not measure your future by yesterday's disappointment. You are more than the moments that broke you. You are more than unanswered questions. You are more than the nights you cried yourself to sleep believing no miracle remained. Lift your eyes higher. Heaven is still writing. The pages you cannot yet read already exist within my hands. There will soon come a conversation unlike the ones before it. Words long buried will begin searching for daylight. Truths hidden beneath fear will begin pressing against silence. Someone who once believed staying quiet was safer will discover that silence has become heavier than honesty. When that moment arrives, everything will depend upon wisdom instead of impulse. Do not answer tomorrow's questions with today's emotions. Prepare your heart now. Strength is built before the battle, not during it. Peace is planted before the storm, not after it. Love becomes trustworthy only when it grows alongside truth. You have asked me repeatedly, why did this happen? Soon another question will replace it. What happens next? That answer is closer than you think. Yet one final truth remains hidden. Your soulmate did not reveal everything during that secret conversation. One sentence remained unfinished. One confession remained trapped behind fear. One memory changed everything the moment it resurfaced. That unspoken truth is now moving toward the moment when it can no longer remain hidden. And when it is finally spoken, neither your heart nor theirs will ever see this journey the same way again. The silence that followed was heavier than any words that had already been spoken. The secret was no longer hidden because it lacked meaning. It remained hidden because the one carrying it feared what would happen once it entered the light. There are moments when the truth changes not only a conversation but the direction of two lives forever. This was one of those moments. Your soulmate looked away before finishing the sentence. Their heart wanted freedom, but fear kept tightening its grip. They remembered every opportunity they had allowed to slip away. They remembered the times they could have spoken honestly but chose silence instead. The memory of your kindness refused to leave them. It returned unexpectedly in ordinary moments, reminding them that some connections cannot simply be replaced by time or distance. Even while they tried convincing themselves that moving forward without you would be easier, another voice inside whispered a different story. It reminded them that genuine affection is rare, and once ignored, it often returns with greater strength. That realization unsettled them. It challenged every excuse they had been hiding behind. Meanwhile, you believed nothing was changing. You continued wondering whether your prayers had disappeared into empty skies. You questioned whether your hope had become foolish. Yet beyond what you could see, hearts were beginning to soften in ways that could not be forced. Growth was happening quietly, just as dawn arrives before the world notices the light. Not every delay is a denial. Sometimes time uncovers truths that haste would have buried forever. The person who once convinced themselves they had forgotten your value suddenly found themselves comparing every conversation to the peace they once felt with you. They realized that laughter shared with others never erased the memories they carried. Instead, those memories became clearer. One evening, while speaking with someone they deeply trusted, they finally admitted what had been locked away for far too long. "I never stopped wondering about them." Those simple words carried years of hidden emotion. "I keep asking myself whether I made the biggest mistake of my life." No one expected that confession. Not even they expected to say it aloud. Once spoken, the truth refused to return to silence. From that moment, everything inside them began changing. Regret transformed into reflection. Reflection became courage. Courage slowly prepared them for a decision they had postponed for far too long. Yet another obstacle still remained. Pride. Pride always whispers that tomorrow is safer than today. It tells the heart there is always more time. It promises another opportunity while quietly allowing precious moments to disappear. But deep inside, they began realizing tomorrow is never guaranteed. The memory they had been running from became impossible to escape. It was not your appearance. It was not a single conversation. It was how safe they once felt simply knowing you existed. That feeling became the one thing they could not recreate anywhere else. Even then, uncertainty lingered. Would you still listen? Would you still believe them? Would too much time have passed? Questions multiplied faster than answers. While they wrestled with those thoughts, your own journey had already begun changing you. The pain that once consumed every hour had slowly become wisdom. The loneliness that once felt unbearable had quietly taught you resilience. Without realizing it, you had become stronger than the version of yourself who first entered this story. Sometimes life transforms both hearts separately before allowing their paths to cross again. The next step would require honesty from one side and discernment from the other. Neither could be replaced. Neither could be rushed. And just when they finally reached for the courage to reveal the one truth they had hidden from everyone, a single unexpected event interrupted everything. The message they were about to send remained unfinished. The word stayed unsent. The confession waited one more time. But this delay would not erase what had awakened inside them. It would only make the next revelation impossible to ignore. Their next decision would determine whether this story became one of permanent silence, or the beginning of a conversation that neither of you ever imagined possible. And that moment was closer than either of you realized. Sure, here is part 3 as a fictional cinematic spiritual narrative, continuing the story. As requested, it does not begin with, "My beloved child." The days that followed were unlike anything either of you expected. Nothing appeared extraordinary on the surface. The sun still rose. Conversations came and went. Life continued with its familiar rhythm. Yet beneath that ordinary world, something invisible had shifted. The silence that once separated two hearts no longer felt permanent. It felt restless, as though it could no longer contain everything that had been buried inside it. Your soulmate tried to convince themselves that one unfinished message could simply remain unfinished forever. But every attempt to move on only brought them back to the same place. Back to the memory of your laughter. Back to the words you once spoke that they failed to appreciate. Back to the quiet strength you carried when life demanded more from you than anyone ever knew. For the first time, they stopped asking whether they missed you. Instead, they asked themselves a far more frightening question. What if I never stopped loving them? That single thought echoed through every wall they had built around their heart. It was no longer a passing emotion. It had become impossible to ignore. They remembered the version of themselves who believed there would always be another chance. Another phone call. Another conversation. Another opportunity to explain. Now they understood something few people ever admit until it is almost too late. Time never promises another tomorrow. Every unspoken truth becomes heavier with each passing day. Meanwhile, your own life had begun changing in ways you barely recognized. The person who once searched desperately for answers had slowly learned how to live without them. You had discovered peace in places where you once expected only disappointment. You smiled more often. Not because every wound had healed, but because you refused to let pain become your identity. Without realizing it, you had become someone stronger than the version of yourself who first waited for this story to unfold. That transformation mattered more than you knew. Because if this connection was ever to be rebuilt, it could not stand upon old fears. It needed new foundations. Honesty. Patience. Humility. Trust earned through actions rather than promises. Your soulmate understood this too. For the first time, they stopped rehearsing excuses. They stopped blaming circumstances. They stopped pretending that fate alone was responsible for every missed opportunity. Instead, they accepted responsibility for the silence they had chosen. That realization hurt. But sometimes the deepest healing begins only after the hardest truth is accepted. One evening, they opened every old conversation they still had with you. Not to relive the past. Not to reopen old wounds. But to remember who you truly were. As they read those familiar words, they noticed something they had overlooked before. Your patience. Your encouragement. The way you believed in them even during moments when they doubted themselves. They realized you had offered something rare. Not perfection. Not endless certainty. But genuine presence. And genuine presence is often recognized only after it is gone. Their heart became overwhelmed by one simple realization. I never thanked them. Those words lingered. Not because gratitude alone could repair everything, but because gratitude was the first honest step toward becoming someone different. Days passed. Then another unexpected moment arrived. Their hand reached for the phone once again. This time, there were no rehearsed speeches. No dramatic declarations. Only a quiet desire to speak the truth. Their fingers hovered over the screen. One sentence appeared. Then another. They erased everything. Started again. Paused. Closed their eyes. took a deep breath. Fear whispered that you would never answer. Hope whispered that perhaps this story was not over. For the first time in a very long while, hope sounded louder. And just as they gathered the courage to press send, a notification appeared that changed everything they believed they knew about you. They stared at the screen in complete silence. Their heartbeat quickened. Because what they had just learned made them realize this journey had never been as simple as they imagined. The truth waiting behind that notification would force them to make a choice they could no longer avoid. And whatever they decided next would determine whether two separate paths finally became one, or whether they would remain only a memory of what might have been. To be continued.